Congressional Republicans have long argued that former IRS official Lois Lerner was hostile to conservatives. Now they believe they have a smoking gun. In 2012, Lerner, who was in England at the time, received an email from a friend that said, "You should hear the wacko wing of the GOP. The U.S. is through. The right-wing radio shows are scary to listen to." Lerner responded, "Great, maybe we are through if there are that many expletives." Her friend continued, "And I'm talking about the hosts of the shows. The callers are rabid." To which Lerner responded, "So we don't need to worry about alien terrorists. It's our own crazies that will take us down."
In our continuing trend here of being as honest as possible, we know and you know that every time something comes up about the Internal Revenue Service, you are laughing, shaking your head, shaking your fist, but it's that dark laughter that really takes over. And that's because you and so many others are reveling in the fact that the governmental agency that hammers away at your paycheck is being hammered for being so arrogant and almighty. But take a step back and consider what's been revealed recently and how that attitude filters down to you and tells a deeper tale of how they want to be laughing at you. Welcome to MidPoint, the president of Citizens for Self-Governance, who has openly advocated for Americans to file lawsuits against the IRS and leading the organization that has funded the first and only class action lawsuit against the agency. Mark Meckler joins us today. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mark, isn't it that at the very base of it, we have to ask ourselves why something like this is simply allowed, this sort of an attitude, this arrogance that permeates this sort of a government agency, and we've never heard of it before. Certainly we may have thought this went on, but now we know that this goes on, how little regard that these people hold the American public in.
Well, I think it's actually, in a way, it's natural. So if you look at the slice of the American public that they're attacking, specifically the Tea Parties and liberty-oriented groups, small government groups, these groups are inherently the enemy of large government. So if you work in one of these institutions and you listen to groups like mine talk, we talk about cutting government. We talk about cutting government waste and making these departments lower and smaller, and in some cases even eliminating them. So I think there's a natural bias inherent in these departments against organizations like ours. And then you have the administration at the very top joking about auditing their enemies, criticizing the Citizens United decision and talking about how they have to find ways to fix that situation. So you have this inherent bias and then enabled by an administration from the top down basically saying going after these organizations is okay.
Well, you just hit on something here that I want to get onto, and this is why it could be deeper than that, because certainly this is all about going after certain groups and certain political groups, if you will. But does this not give us, certainly all of this that's going on, give us an idea of what really goes on in the culture of the IRS? Because if it happens to one group, then what about the guy and the gal who's down here making $35,000, $40,000 a year, maybe with an occasional bad tax return here that gets audited? These are the people, I think, that are saying, wait a minute, if you do it up here, what's to stop you from doing it farther down the line?
Well, nothing's to stop them. And in fact, most of the victims of IRS abuse that we're aware of and that are represented in our lawsuit are not big organizations. They're people who belong to or formed very small local organizations. For example, the lead plaintiff in our litigation, the NorCal Tea Party, this is headed by a couple in their late 60s, a retired couple. We're doing this on their own dime. They've also been audited personally. So they're the small folks that are being attacked by the IRS for their political views. Amazingly, openly, the federal government has now been weaponized against citizens that criticize it.
All right, now what you're talking about, NorCal, I want to bring everybody up to speed on this. U.S. District Judge Susan Glott rejected the IRS's motion to dismiss this class action lawsuit. And in an article that you wrote, the government had the audacity to claim that citizens have no right to redress against their own government regardless of the behavior of the IRS. If you would dig into this case just a little bit more in brief and tell us why this is so important, but not only that, who are you going to hold accountable here if you win this lawsuit?
Sure. Well, for us, the main thing was we saw everybody complaining about the IRS's behavior, and we saw lots of organizations were fundraising around this issue, but very few were doing anything about it. So knowing that one of the affected parties was my own local Tea Party, and knowing, as I do, that there were hundreds of Tea Parties all over the country affected, we went out and raised the money and hired the lawyers to sue on behalf of those Tea Parties, claiming that they were illegally targeted, abused, and thrashed, essentially, by the IRS. And interestingly, the president originally said he was outraged by the behavior of the IRS that was alleged, and he would get to the bottom of it. And about the same time that the president started calling it a phony scandal, the government filed a motion to dismiss in the case. And the motion essentially said, regardless of what the IRS does, they are immune from any sort of redress by the citizens. Of course, you just described that the district court judge said that's outrageous. And of course, the citizens have redress against their government for such abuses. But this shows you the attitude, the tone and tenor of the government. It's not our government any longer. It's not of, for, and by the people. It's actually government against the people.
All right, now I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a moment, which is one of my favorite games to play every day here. Here's a note on this. The average rate of Americans audited each year is 1%. That means 10 times as many Tea Party supporters were audited. Now, devil's advocate, people out there are saying, okay, wait, these are new groups, these are people, these are political groups. They might just be trying to get away with this a little bit. These are people who might be taking advantage of the system right now, jobbing it a little bit, trying to get a lot more from the IRS than they can, trying to write off things that they can't. So as a new group and people who are trying to sneak through the system, then the IRS did the right thing, making sure that they toe the line just like everybody else.
Well, if it were just like everybody else, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it. I'm no fan of the IRS, but when you look at the actual numbers, originally people on the left tried to claim that leftist groups were targeted in the same numbers. The reality is about 17% of the groups that go through this process requesting this kind of charitable status from the IRS, about 17% receive additional audit questions, some sort of additional scrutiny. In regard to Tea Party groups, if you had the name Tea Party in your name, or frankly, Patriot or Constitution, your audit rate or your additional scrutiny rate was 100%. So this is not equal behavior. This is not the IRS trying to screen out groups that might be taking advantage. This is the IRS intentionally targeting and attacking groups with a particular political ideology.
You say that Tea Party groups are targeted here, and again, we hear this a lot. Can you be more specific?
Sure. Well, I'll use our local group as an example, the lead plaintiff, the NorCal Tea Party. They received literally hundreds of questions. The questions were outrageous. Things like, name every speaker that's ever spoken at one of your events. Provide us with a copy of everything that's ever been given out at one of your events. Provide us with a copy of all reading materials suggested at your events. We had to give them literally everything. It was bankers' boxes full of materials, only a couple of weeks to comply. In fact, the request was so extreme. At one of these events, this local Tea Party gave out a red, white, and blue stuffed teddy bear. We were required to send one of those teddy bears to the IRS, which I'm sure they're enjoying today.
Is the government, in your opinion now, and in the opinion of those who fight against this, is the government afraid what you'll uncover and what you'll find out about the IRS?
I want to kind of parse that question. Does the government know that there are really bad things there that can be uncovered? Yeah, they absolutely know that. Are they afraid? No, I don't believe they're afraid. They've gotten away with it for so long, and they have infinite resources. Remember, when we're fighting against the government, we're fighting against an entity that has access to our money to fight us. We're fighting against an entity that should be completely open and transparent. When we ask them for things, it's our government. They should simply give them to us, but they make us spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the information we request. So I don't think they're afraid because they've gotten away with it for so long. They've used thuggery and intimidation for so long successfully. I believe they think they're simply going to get away with it.
Is Lois Lerner, in your opinion, just the poster child for flat-out liars at the IRS?
Oh, clearly she is. And, if you look at Lois Lerner's history, she has a long history of doing this. She was at the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, before she was at the IRS. And she was essentially disciplined for doing the same sort of thing to Christian right organizations at the Federal Election Commission. And like it always works on the left, that's not something to be ashamed of on the left. It's a badge of honor. And it got her a nice plum job at the IRS where she continued her crusade against conservative organizations. And yeah, flat out liar, absolutely, from the very beginning.
All right, but let's do this. With about a minute we have left here, certainly lawsuits happen, judges happens, all this happens. And after a while, it all kind of goes away and things go back to normal here. Is there any reason for the general public, the person out there, the one listening to you right now, to believe that what you're doing and what's happening right now in Washington will actually change this culture and make a difference?
I think it will change the culture. We can try to count on congressional hearings and politicians, but we know that they never make a difference. They've never made a difference in America. Only the people make a difference in America. So it's up to us. And when I say us, I don't mean me. I don't mean my organization. It's up to us as citizens to continue to demand the answers and the information. And then there's a bigger play. We have to reform the government. We have another project to do that, the Convention of States project. It's up to us. The government's never going to do it by themselves.
Mark Meckler, you have undoubtedly opened the eyes of a lot of people. You've raised a lot more questions for an awful lot of people, and I'm certainly there are folks who are going to say, I wouldn't mind suing the IRS. You may just have a lot of folks on your side before it's all said and done. Thanks so much for joining us, Mark. We'll do it again.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Face it, you pay your taxes like everybody else, and we know there's a lot of people out there going, it's not a bad idea. I'd like to go after the IRS from time to time. Hold off. There's a long way for this to go. Ask Lois Lerner. She'll tell you that one. Later on this hour, they are young, they are dynamic, and they can indeed change the world. And next up, what our guest said yesterday about Israel and the snap reaction it generated from our viewers. It was stunning to hear it, and certainly some of the reaction we got was interesting as well. That's all coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.